That's the way my clients have been. Whoa, I'm still
We're in
talking
it.
to Michael, but we are live, and we are a professional podcast and live show. So we are going to start professionally. This is the Remodelers on the Rise show. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, but you guys have known me as somebody who doesn't necessarily, chase the dollar or sponsor this or whatever. But I am kind of excited because there's going to be an official sponsor of the Remodelers on the Rise show starting in March.
That's
Who's
so
it going to
cool.
be? How, Kyle, are you sure about doing that? You've very carefully built your community. Now all of a sudden, what are you going to sell us sponsorships and we can't trust you because you're getting no, none of that. None of that's a slippery slope though, isn't though, Michael?
If you've got good boundaries,
Of
you can
course.
do it.
Right. And it's a company that I already promote quite a bit and I'm excited about it. So next time you hear this show next week, it'll be welcome to the Remodelers on the Rise show, sponsored by, and you guys will just have to wait and see who it is. I have Michael Anschel with OA Design, Build, and Architecture. This is multiple times he's been on the show. Michael, hello. Hope you're having a wonderful 2/22/22.
I was realizing we have such an auspicious day for our discussion. It's
Now, what
cool.
is define auspicious?
Like lucky. I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
lucky.
Because I guess when I hear it, it has a negative connotation to it, and I'm like, it's not negative.
Oh,
It's kind of cool.
auspicious is a good thing. That's usually like, when you're going to get married, you want to find an auspicious day to get married on, a
Mm,
day that's, full of meaning, that's lucky, that's going to bring health and success
got
and
it.
all
Got it.
that fun
Nobody
stuff.
seemed to be that excited in my house when I set an alarm earlier for 2/22/22 on 2/22/22. My wife was like, "Whatever, Kyle." I'm
That's
like,
so cool.
"Dude, it's
That's super
cool.
cool.
Can you just play along, honey?" All right, we are already at double digits of people watching. The topic that we're going to cover today, we coined it the myth of the markup, which is Michael's way of making this topic dramatic and feisty.
I got to stir that pot.
He's stirring the pot. So the what we're going to go through, and the reason that we're doing this show is a couple of reasons. One, Michael posted something about a month ago, and he just took a lot of the concepts that he has related to, is just a volume-based markup the way to go? I know it's pretty common in our industry. What if we had a more transparent approach or a different approach? What if we made our money through charging for these different line items plus overhead plus profit, and allow the customer to kind of see the specific price of your plumber and your electrician and that piece of material? So we'll gravitate towards that. But when I saw the slides, I thought, okay, Michael, you're stepping even more clearly into how to explain this. So we're going to go just kind of slide by slide through and attempt to just kind of say, here's what Michael is presenting, here's how he uses it, etc.
Cool.
The other reason that we're having this conversation is because I think it's important to continue to challenge the way that we all do business, myself included as a business coach. What, am I supposed to just be coaching and suggesting exactly what I suggested 4 years ago? Is it a contradiction to be able to change how I'm viewing things and to look at what's going on in our industry and look at the ground level of when you guys are sitting in front of prospects, dealing with material price escalations like crazy, dealing with plumbers that are charging you way more now than they did when they quoted you 3 months ago, dealing with an industry that is more transparent because of Build.com and people being able to quickly see it? There's things that are happening. There's things that are changing, and we have to continue to look at how we are approaching how we price our work and how we present that.
Adapt or die.
Some people would say adapt or die. So while the majority of my clients still approach things with a volume-based markup, while the majority of the clients that I've worked with and that I know and love still kind of present things in a lump sum basis, over the last year, I've had numerous clients switch to more of what Michael is doing, and I'm listening very carefully as they tell me the results of that, and I'm liking what I'm hearing. So I'm continuing. My goal in my business and in my role in the industry is to continue to challenge us to think. You may, and when I preface this, I said, just come with an open mind. We don't need to defend the way we do it. Just first understand what Michael is saying. I've also been working on Michael to tone down his hatred of volume-based markup, and he is softening his stance because he realizes if you want people to come over to your side, you ought to be kind to them and
You're not
not
the only person.
combative.
Yeah, I sometimes I swing a little too heavy with the
Uh-huh.
bat.
Uh-huh. Good.
Yeah.
So can you just introduce yourself briefly, where you're from and whatnot, and then we're going to start going through these slides, sir.
Well, so Michael Anschel with OA Design, Build, and Architecture. We're in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is we are wrapping up 27 years in this wild and woolly industry. And I'm wondering if the aggressiveness might be just the whole Minnesota. Hockey. We're born out of the ice water. Take a swig of
Mm,
whiskey and go skate away. Could be
mm.
that. It's like
I mean, a
fun.
lot of Minnesotans are very sweet and kind
We are
and
very
Betty
sweet.
Berry.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
Um,
if you want to figure out, I mean, we can spend the time justifying why you're being mean to people sometimes, but you're
yeah.
too kind. You're mostly very, very kind.
I want to see the change happen. And like you said here in the intro, Kyle, doing business the way that we did it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, man, if we were still doing it that way today, that would suggest that we've really not kept in touch with how things have changed.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, we have an oversimplified methodology that we're using, and there is, I'm going to use the word better. There is a better way to do it. And yeah, it's sometimes a little bit more complicated, but I believe in the remodeling community. They're much smarter, than like a builder,
Hmm.
say.
Okay, there we go. Oh, there you go. Now you're getting everybody to go. That's right. All right, so let's just review kind of the structure of this and kind of what we're talking about. Um, so you're doing a little bit of just the past of going the myth of the markup. Tell us about this. It says 40% margin. We've been pushed an idea that stems from two beliefs that are no longer true, and the two that you have are these two. Tell us about them.
Yeah. So I think when I was a younger remodeler, um, and the 1.68 or the 40% margin was presented, and I thought, all right, that's what we should be doing. That's what the norm is. Um, I think that I just kind of took it for granted. And it took me a while to realize that origin of that really stemmed from like the 70s, when you had basically self-performed work, carpenters or people in the summer who would become remodelers, because there wasn't a remodeling industry per se prior to this point, right? We're building houses, but we're not doing a lot of remodeling. There's some fix it, handyman, repair, but it's maybe a framing crew. Maybe it's one person with like 4 or 5 guys or gals who are, building the stuff, but they are doing the same kinds of tasks. And so things like capacity based markup to calculate what you should be charging for your labor rate works, because you're kind of easy to do. If you were just doing
Mhm.
roofing, you're just doing siding, then something like having a single markup works, because you're performing the same task with basically the same materials and the same labor over time. And then the second one that I hear whenever I push the notion of transparency or a more robust estimating system, forget the transparency side. An internal, more robust estimating methodology is contractors can't handle it. You got to keep it simple. This 1.68 is easy for people to grasp. They know how to do basic cogs. Don't, don't make them run before they can walk. And I just don't buy that.
Hmm. Oh, that was the end of your statement. Okay, good. Yeah, I know.
There's
You don't
smart
buy it.
people out there.
Okay, fair enough. So those are a couple that you're seeing as myths, is that we can handle this. I think actually, let's go to the next slide, and then I'll kind of share a few other thoughts that I wanted to mention. So what does that have to do with markup? You created this slide that says if you're the agent of the client, you have an obligation to be transparent around costs. You are a service provider. Tell us your thought on that.
Yeah, and so I should be clear when I'm talking about remodeling and building, right? So I am
Hmm.
talking about those people in this industry that are not single trade,
Okay.
especially design build, or especially like light design build, which I think the vast
So
majority of
so I think that's
remodelers are.
interesting. Let me just
Yeah.
say what I heard there. If you're a roofer, you probably ought to have just a single markup across the board. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, if you're doing siding, it makes sense because it's so clear that calculate what your overhead and profit need to be, figure out whether it's capacity based on your labor or what your volume is going to be, and do it that way. It makes sense to do it that way. Your argument is when we're getting into design, build, remodeling, it is a different animal.
Or
And
contracting, true contracting, right?
okay.
Where you've got multiple disciplines, multiple trades. So if you're doing bathroom, kitchen, basement, addition, whether or not you have, some people have a labor force, some people don't have a labor force, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
what are we calling it now? The desktop or the laptop contractor, which most of us, I think, should aspire probably to be. But you are managing multiple things. You're managing a much more complex network. And to this point, you're the contractor. You are hired by the client as their agent to navigate the construction industry, right? The
Okay.
client's coming to you with an idea. They want this space to go from being this to being this. Maybe they've enlisted the help of an architect or a designer. Maybe they've come to you for those services. Either way, you are going to be guiding them through best practices, best materials, the best assemblies, and going out and finding the right subcontractors to perform and execute the work, which you then oversee on behalf of the contract of the homeowner. Everything you're doing is really that's why I said here, you're a service provider. It's a service industry. And so anybody who makes analogies to retail or restaurant is missing the point. We are none of those things. We don't have a prepackaged thing that we're selling where we've already figured out our costs and our margins so we can sell that and at a particular rate. New home construction is even different, right? You're building on spec. You package all your stuff and you say, here, there's the cost of the item. If you want it, great. If you don't,
Okay.
great.
So
Right?
again, that's what you're trying to draw attention to, is to look at our role a little bit differently than maybe we have in the past. And this idea of if you're a design build remodeler, we've got some comments too. We're going to click on those in a second. If you're a design build remodeler and you truly want to partner with them, you truly want to be a service provider, how we kind of price and package things up is going to matter. Is kind of what you're getting at.
Okay.
Annette from earlier said, you're just passionate about what you do and what you believe in, and you see how it improves the industry. That's why you're when we were talking about you being a big bully. That's probably what it is.
Yeah, big.
Somebody said this feels like Paul McManus, but he hasn't gone to StreamYard.com/Facebook. But I'm taking a wild guess.
Probably
Maybe you
Paul.
start using the word myth then, right? So this is important because the words that we use and the way we approach it, it lands differently for people. So yes, some contractors are single trade, and some like to keep it simple. That's those are two outlooks on it. Just like you have a third outlook that says, hey, this is another way of doing it. Interesting feedback. How much money should a client have to put down for you to be considered an agent of the client? Any thought on that?
$1. I mean, as soon as there's a transaction, as soon as money is exchanged hands, you work for them.
Fair enough. Yes, we're the client's partner. We have the same goals. That's good. Remodeling Sherpa, Jim
Or
calls
something
it.
to watch later. Looks like a YouTube video.
Ooh. The remodeling Sherpa?
I don't know. Is that the
I think
YouTube
he's
logo?
referring to us as like he's listening to how we're trying
Ah,
to navigate them through the process, and he's calling us remodeling Sherpa. It's
I
kind of
like
nice.
that.
It's kind of nice. Okay, so let's keep going through this.
Actually,
Charge for your service. Yes, we do need to do that.
yeah, chart. But it's again service, right? It's a
Okay.
service.
Okay. You're an advocate for your client in our industry. I think we already got into that, so I want to get into this
Yeah.
page. So these are your direct project costs. So why don't you take a stab at kind of you're pulling these out, which sometimes they just kind of get hidden in, well, we cover that in overhead, or our project manager pays for that, or that's just part of what our office manager does, or our office assistant does. You're trying
Right.
to draw attention for us and say, hey, consider all these different things that you're doing and start thinking about how much time do you actually put into that? What is the actual cost, true cost of doing these things? So unpack this a little bit and maybe kind of move into your COPE spiel.
Sure. Well, so I'll start with the COPE spiel, which is the cost of project execution, that's the
There
next
we go.
slide. So
Yep.
let's go back. But it's this notion in our categories that, sorry, Kyle, I didn't mean to make you jump slides.
It's okay. I'm a
But the
professional.
categories that you had listed a second ago, each one of those categories represents an action that the single margin multiplier was designed to capture.
To pay for.
Right. So the guy who came up with this idea of a single margin multiplier, right, was basically looking at all of this stuff and said, it's too complicated for you to figure out. Just use this big number.
I mean, maybe he was saying that, Michael.
That's definitely what Walt was saying.
Okay. All right, fine.
He said it directly.
Okay. All right.
But, it's like, yeah, so you can take your profit, your overhead, and all of the stuff that you do, it'll just get captured.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't reflect well on the complexity of a project. Again, if you're doing something very simple and straightforward, that does work. But there's a significant difference in what it takes to execute on a kitchen remodel versus an addition with a kitchen remodel, right? Versus a lower level finish versus replacing a roof.
Okay.
And they might end up at similar dollar amounts, but using those dollar amounts as a way to calculate what you should be putting in for project management on that job, for overhead, for any of it, just doesn't work, right? I might have a $50,000 job that takes a week. I might have a $50,000 job that takes 8 weeks. Those have to be looked at very differently. I might have one that has more risk associated or has a client that's going to need a lot more interaction. Or subcontractors that are going to need a lot of hand-holding because it's a very specific, complex installation where things have got to go right. 16th of an inch tolerances throughout. I need to have somebody there on site the whole time.
Okay. So give the punchline of how you do it then. So you're not taking everything, figuring out what your total volume is, your overhead and profit, and saying, let's slap a 1.67 or 1.50 markup on this. Tell kind of explain how you do it.
So I've got each of these categories in my estimating database, and we use clear estimates. And so I've got a labor rate assigned for project management, and we'll go through the project and we'll go through each of these categories and say, well, we think we're going to put about 22 hours on this. We're going to put, say, 130 hours on this.
Okay, so hang on. So I think it helps to, and apologize for interrupting, but I want to make sure everybody understands it.
Yeah.
You could take and say you're in your estimate and you look at that material procurement, ordering all of the materials, receiving them, checking them, inspecting them, opening them up, making sure everything's good. And you look at this project and you say, based on you've been tracking it, people, this is a big key, is Michael actually tracks all of these things. His team in the office, not in the field, his team in the office is clocking in when they're ordering materials for the Hunt project. He can say, well, a similar project that we did for the Smiths, we spent 27 hours doing all of the material procurement. That's super interesting. Even if you don't go this route with your pricing and everything, when was the last time we actually thought or tracked or tried to measure how much time we truly spend in each of these categories? That's super interesting. But Michael, and your point is the way that you price your project is you look at that material procurement based on your experience, based on previous tracking, based on how many materials and the complexity of all, and you say it's going to be 25 hours times $60 an hour is going to be our cost for providing that service to this homeowner.
Nailed it. You got it. Perfect.
Okay. So you go through and you do that for each of these different categories, which you call the cost of project execution, your COPE. We have all of our cost of goods sold, and then we have all of our cost of project execution. Boom, 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 boom. With further down the line, a line item that says overhead expenses, marketing, insurance, and profit.
Yep, exactly. A great way to think about COPE is if you're thinking about a task, what you should charge for. Think about if the project didn't exist, what would you be doing? What would your PM be doing if that project didn't exist? So anything that happens outside of that project existing, that's overhead. But everything that's connected to the project is direct project cost.
Materials.
So education, you're always going to have a portion of their time that is going to be assigned to overhead because you have education, you have company meetings, you're working on systems. There's all this stuff that happens outside of the specific job.
Yeah. So you have salary staff clock into these activities on a daily basis.
So yeah, it was a big part of our initiative was to have everybody track their time, and for us to go through and do some pretty good, I use the word postmortems on past projects to get a sense of what the time allocation had been and how to parse that, and then and then came up with some templates that are they're good starting places for a typical project. So a typical kitchen, is going to have roughly this allocation of hours. So I can just grab that module and drop it in. And then I have the ability to massage that based on what I think the project is going to be. There's still a little bit of guesswork, intuition, right?
Estimating.
It is estimating. Yeah.
Somebody else said, how accurate is the clocking in and clocking out when you're working at several projects at once?
Most people are working on a thing at a time, but if you're working on 6 different things at the same time, that would be difficult to track. Yeah. Okay. Again, I'm not looking to necessarily get pinpoint penny accurate with how much time I spent talking to clients. For example, client meeting, right? We have a biweekly client meeting. So if a project's going to last 10 weeks, we know that there are going to be 5 biweekly meetings, a startup and an end meeting. Each of those meetings is going to last X number of hours and requires X amount of hours of prep and then recap at the end. So I could just easily say client meetings or client management, I'm going to need roughly 42 hours on that 10
Okay,
weeks.
but you are tracking it. So just like I put 10 hours for demolition in my quote and I look at my expected versus actual on all of these costs of project execution, you're looking at your expected versus actual as well.
Correct.
Wow, it took us an extra 10 hours to do materials. What's going on here, right? That type of thing. So somebody said, so people are not currently clocking and clocking out many times a day. I think they are. No,
don't think of it as clocking in and clocking out. We use a product called Clockify. It just sits in your browser window and you just enter your tasks. Some people write them down on a piece of paper and then enter them in at the end of the day. So it's not that it's not assigned to how you're getting paid. It's just a way for us to track. And we're not perfect. And I'm just, in case people are thinking you've got to be religious about this, you don't. It's if you do it a couple times, you're going to get a sense for where these things should fit. And then if you want to keep tracking, it's a great way for you as an owner to see what your people are working on.
Got it. So going back to just the logistics of this, basically, if I am a homeowner that is looking at the project you're quoting for me, what I'm seeing is the exact line item for that plumbing fixture, for the plumbing install, for the demolition phase. I'm seeing line by line all of my costs that are on that project. And then as I go through, I'm seeing the estimating cost, the plan review, the scheduling cost, the material procurement, material returns, trade walkthroughs, meetings. I'm seeing all of these. So if I go to material procurement, I see that I'm paying $2,422 to have you manage that.
Exactly.
Okay. And then at the bottom, I've got overhead and I've got profit. And I think what do you aim for in those 2 categories a lot of times?
So those are 2 independent lines. So contractor's profit, we start at 18%. That's what we put on the project. That's what we hope to take for ourselves. And overhead is a little bit more complicated because it's a function of time as well as scale.
Okay.
So that could range between, 22% to like maybe 15%. It just depends.
Okay. Somebody said if you're not religious about it, it seems to lose its usefulness as a job costing tool.
That's probably Paul, is my guess.
Maybe. I would agree with that statement.
So again, I think in terms of estimated versus actuals and doing that post-mortem, I can see all of my PM's time, right? But whether or not they coded it to everything, and I'm not going to necessarily go through each one and nitpick if we were spot on or horribly off. Again, I think the purpose of, and again, this is maybe the baby steps bit. Yes, if your staff is going to really follow the rules and they're going to do it every time, you're going to have great project reporting. That would be awesome. Real world is it gets busy and crazy out there.
Okay.
And I'm trying to soften it a little bit for folks and saying, if it's not being tracked perfectly, the goal is to get close. The goal is to get those management numbers, those cost of project execution numbers, more or less accurately represented in the estimate so that you're covering those costs and you can make representation to the client in the estimating phase about what those would be.
Okay. So I'm going to get back to some questions, but a few other thoughts related to this. As some of my clients have been evaluating this and they're like, man, I've seen Michael talk about this. It's kind of intriguing. Some of the reasons that that's coming up is because they're doing 6-figure plus projects. Because the material, like I mentioned in the opening, there's so much fluctuation in materials. There's so much fluctuation in our trade partners and the costs of that, that our industry, people are embracing technology a lot more. They can go to build.com, because of these different factors. There's some pressure for us to get a little bit more open with how we show how we are arriving at their price. So there's some people that are kind of like, it kind of intrigues me. And the way that I've been coaching people is like, hey, do your proposal for that $100,000 kitchen like you normally would, and then tell me how much gross profit you have in that project. Let's say you have $30,000 of gross profit. So you have $70,000 of cost of goods sold. You added your markup to it, $30,000 of gross profit to get to your selling price of $100,000. Now, here's all the different categories, basically taking what's in that line item. Here's your overhead line, and here's your profit. Go divvy that $30,000 up into all of that and see how it feels.
That's one good way to start. And you might realize, and so I want to make sure that we're being clear. This is an exercise that you're doing first and foremost for yourself as a company. The ability to be transparent with the client. Some clients want to see it. Some clients don't care, right? If the project is over budget and they want to understand where are the drivers in the project, this allows you to do that. But I think one of the things that we learned was smaller projects require a lot of management, and that 1.68 wasn't the right number for a small project. It actually needs to be a lot bigger. And that on larger projects, when we're in our, $4, $5, $6 million project, those numbers actually come down. So it really is, in many ways, smaller projects benefit more from this process.
Interesting.
And larger projects, you can be more competitive because
the cost of project execution,
overly inflated numbers. Yeah.
Gotcha. So the way that I've been telling people to do that is just to get a taste of it and go, interesting. Because once you divvy up that $30,000 into these different categories, you can your sales pitch to the client is, look, you can see all of this if you'd like. Here it is. Take it or leave it. And here's kind of how we arrive at our price. And you divide it up where at the end of the day, we're looking to make an 8% net profit. What's this overhead number? Well, here's what's included in our overhead. Does it really cost that much for just all the materials and this and that? Yeah, we spend a lot of hours making sure that this is done well and . So that's been an interesting way for some people to kind of ease into it. And I would say that if any of this is kind of intriguing to you, one, you can reach out to Michael or I, and we'll send you kind of that list of all the different categories. But just take a project that you're currently doing and try it this way and see what it looks like. See what it feels like. That's a good way to start. And just the feedback that I've been getting from a lot of people, I saw some comments the other day when we posted from Rick Goldstein, from Tate Watson, of guys that have been trying this and they just really like it. Rainey Blair down in Atlanta, they've been embracing this type of approach. And they're not doing it exactly the way you're doing it, but they're using a lot of similarities. So, Michael, I think we'll keep going a little bit here. But I think the big goal I had was to have you kind of do your spiel and walk through those walk through the slides, and also just get real practical of like, here's how it's actually done, and kind of here's what it looks like. So I think have we done a pretty good job of that?
Yeah, I think so. I want to note there's one. Yeah. Oh, well, look at this. This is perfect timing. I was going to say
a lot of questions.
Okay. There's a side benefit to this, and Laurel's question about clients procuring materials is exactly one of those benefits, which is because you're no longer marking up the materials, right? When you're showing the materials in the project, you're showing them at the cost that it would cost you to buy the material. If they take the material out, if they decide to supply it, your profit isn't being impacted by that action. So in other words, if the client picks a granite that's $55 a square foot or $85 a square foot, you don't care, right? Because you're in, right.
It's a
So you
change of
started out and
mindset.
they're like, oh, I want to do this fancy thing. And then they're like, ooh, we're over budget. And then they dial it back and you're like, I'm losing profit now. You're not.
Okay.
Your
So
profit is tucked away over here.
so how would you
And so
summarize this? What's the main benefit? Win more jobs because clients feel they're not paying so much overhead?
win more jobs. No, I would say that's an interesting one. I would say the main benefit is internally, on every project accurately how much of that project is actually going to go to your profit, and how much of that you can spend on your overhead costs during the course of the project. It's a huge liberator when it comes to managing your cash flow and having good, accurate predictions for what you're actually going to be walking away with at the end of the job.
Okay.
The second part would be, I think it's a big differentiator in the marketplace when you say there's no black box. When we get to estimating, we'll show you our numbers. We don't mark up the materials, so you don't have to worry about it. If you can find that product for less, great. I'm not tied to it. If you want to buy the light fixtures on build.com and have them delivered, cool. And I'll even go over here because I'm not going to have to manage those materials, and I'll take a couple hours out over there.
And people don't get caught up with that example, because some people will be like, what? And then they get an inferior product, and then I have to warranty it. Fair enough. That's your decision if you want to allow them to order materials or not. People can still say, no, we order materials because this, that, and the other. Don't get caught up in that. Again, understand kind of the concept. We got a ton of questions. So I would say the other main benefit is just the ability to really, what I'm sensing and what I'm feeling as I'm listening to clients who are using this is just very much, it's so much easier to get into that partner and ally mode. We're going the same direction here. There's so much, I've heard so much frustration, especially in the last year when material prices are going bonkers, of just this friction and this pressure of like, why is this so much? Wow, that is so high compared to this. What is going on? And when we are holding all of that tight, it's hard to explain it to a homeowner. So especially in today's selling environment, this is allowing you to kind of put the guard down, still protect your profit. One thing Michael said early, not today, but when I started talking to him about this a year ago, and I'm like, I don't like it, Michael. This is dumb, Michael. And I'm coming around.
That's true.
Is Kyle, I'm making more money now. I'm at a higher quote unquote markup, if you will. I'm making more in gross profit than I ever was before. That got my attention. And that should get your attention. Okay. What is
So
hang on, you got about 14
Yeah.
questions. So do you want to say what you're about to say, or do you want to go through the questions?
Well, I was just going to say, on small projects, we're about a 1.84 if you were to reverse engineer it.
Okay.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. Is the hourly cost above the line loaded or actual?
Ooh, it is loaded.
Yes.
It's got to be loaded. And we use capacity to figure out our labor costs on our carpenters, not on our project managers.
Okay. And we have a capacity question. We'll talk about that in a second. So not for job costing then. It's kind of set up once and then check it occasionally to make sure you're not too far off.
That's a good way to describe that. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I think that is key. The real benefit is internal. You mentioned like, look, this is partly just for us to understand all of this. Annette has a long one. We're going to skip that for now. We'll come back and read it. Annette, economy of scale in all things. That was related to that. It's a great way to differentiate your level of service. That's what you were just hitting at. Is it's the conversation is just different.
Well, and they really feel like you are working with them. I use this example of you're sitting on the same side of the table with the client, not across the table from the client. It's not a sales pitch anymore. You're there helping them navigate. This is your project. This is what you want. This is how it's going to cost. And if it's costing too much, then we have to go and look at other materials or other methods.
Yeah. Somebody said another benefit, all my vendors can quote my prices to the clients.
Nice.
I want them to, no markup applied. That's interesting.
That's good.
Wouldn't your risk be greater for more expensive materials? Therefore, the profit should reflect that.
I guess that would depend on the material. But if in the case of stone, for example, that's going through a stone fabricator, there's no risk to me one way or the other if they're using quartzite or if they're using granite. I'm managing a fabricator.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
measuring
so
it. I'm
yes,
doing a
you
measure and an install.
sure, you look at the risk, and to that point, if you're dealing with something more intricate, if you're dealing with something that's got more potential for error or issues, you may add a few more hours into the project management category of going, okay, if we're going to make that change, that's going to require me to be on site a few times. I'm going to want to make sure this is done properly compared to what we were doing there. I'm actually going to add a few hours because I'm going to want to be on site for that. Is that cool? Yeah, that makes sense. Right. So you can adjust things based on that. But that is even an interesting conversation for me to have a
Mhm.
client sit in front and say, actually, we're going to go with this more intricate design. Okay, awesome. But I need to tell you this, I'm going to want to be there more often because of this than if we went that route. And I need to adjust this up to accommodate that. That's interesting.
Exactly. And you can always
Um,
throw a contingency in. If there's something where you right are nervous, you can always add a line for contingency.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
This one says we tried it out on a trial basis rather than making it a full commitment to go all in. We're still in the trial period and making tweaks. It's going to take a while to have it finally fine tuned, but clients really appreciate seeing the breakdown versus one big number.
Cool. Mystery user.
Can
Thank you.
you walk through how you measure capacity? I sense this method is supposed to tell me I can charge less and take on more work. So, talking about capacity based markup is a whole conversation. It's already
Separate
37
conversation.
minutes after. So, to do it justice, we'll have to unpack that. We'll have to unpack that another time, or maybe we'll comments underneath there. I want to go back to Annette. Annette said, even if clients procure their own materials, we started to charge additional owner furnished material management costs because we are still always still have to measure and calculate the square foot and quantity they need,
Mhm.
make sure it's
Mhm.
compatible, make sure it's on site, coordinate the trade partners,
Mhm.
etc. So it's kind of emphasizing that even if they go that route, there is still a cost of project execution for us to
Mhm.
manage that.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. If people watching this could just share what's a takeaway that you had. Again, you don't have to necessarily agree with this approach. You may say, "Man, I don't even want to go down that road." I like to say, "I do the project from start to finish. It costs $147,200. This stuff is just going to be a mess to get into this."
Wait a second. Wait a second, Kyle. We're still selling in a fixed sum environment. This is we're transparent in the estimating side.
Mm,
Once we press play on the project, we are largely in a fixed
mm,
sum category. If they want to do open book, this allows you to do open book or cost plus.
hmm
But I'm not necessarily saying that you should. That is, if you're going to do cost plus, you need to add a ton more hours on that project accounting side because you're always having to report back
Interesting.
to the client where things actually fall.
Okay. So what you're getting at is, as we're putting the estimate together, we're kind of doing this, but a lot of times when it gets time to contract signing, they are signing a contract. It might have a lot of line items in it still, but they're signing a contract. And the risk, if you underestimated hours or this or that, is on you, and vice versa. You have slippage and grippage versus it being cost plus.
Well, and if you have an escalation clause, you can go back to the client. Your lumber quote that you looked at together was this, lumber prices went up. You go to the client, you say lumber prices went up. This is our revised lumber quote.
Yep.
It's an additional $12,344 on your project. The client looks at it and they say, I see that that's gone up. Got it. I understand. Easy.
Yeah. What is the initial pitch to the customer on this approach?
Uh, no black box. We take that one of the most number one reported issues that consumers have with remodeling contractors or contractors in general is they don't understand how we come up with our costs. And I honestly, I think a lot of remodelers don't know how they come up with their costs. And so our pitch is um, we sit on the same side of the table with you when it comes time to look at costs, and we're fully transparent with helping to understand what is driving the cost of a project.
Okay. I
Yeah,
mean, it wasn't the greatest pitch I've ever heard,
it
but
wasn't. I'm not a good pitch man.
I was hoping for something more fantastic. So was the person that asked that question, but it was all right. Would you be willing to share an example for a kitchen or similar project?
Maybe not at this moment, like right now. Pull up a project and screen share,
But
Kyle.
you would send it to me and I could share it.
I mean,
Don't do
if
it
you want me
now.
to,
Don't
I
do it
can.
now. We're
Oh,
wrapping up.
all right. But yes,
But
absolutely. And in fact,
okay,
I'll put it in the vault. Um, I've got a couple of things with our transparency group that I've already created, so I can throw that up there.
Okay. Yeah. So remodelersvault.com is a little database of just good templates, examples, things that we've set up and that the remodelers community have shared over time. Some of my stuff, some of my client stuff. So remodelersvault.com, and we'll Michael will share it with me and we'll get it up there. Do you commit the same process with change orders?
Ooh, that's a good question. It depends on the size of the change order. For small change orders, we do change order plus 20%. We have a minimum 20% markup on change orders, paid 100% at the time of request. But if the change order is complex, like, hey, I also wanted to remodel the front porch, or I also wanted to, I don't know, whatever, put in a geothermal system, and then I don't know, big AV or whatever, I'm going to go back and estimate that like I would a normal project.
No, Scott, did you hear me saying wuss when you said 20%? I was just trying to razz you. But then I also thought, wait a minute, before he adds the 20%, I bet you he has some hours in there for the material procurement and the project management. That's probably also already included.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, good. I like this concept, even if it's only to think about how you are charging for your services and how it might help you explain costs to the customer. Right? This is making you think about, we have true costs when it comes to all of these cost of project execution items. So when you say, man, why does this cost so much? Well, we've got material ordering and receiving and checking. We have our project management meetings. We have managing the schedule. We have our trade partner meetings. All of a sudden you start thinking about these hidden things because they're just overhead, and you really start to, it can definitely help you be a stronger salesperson. And this person said, thank you very much. Thank you guys very much. This was great. Good.
Awesome.
So it's interesting as we kind of continue to talk about these things, how sometimes it takes a while to wrap your head around something. This is more complex. This is totally different than what so many of us have kind of approached when it comes to how we're pricing and packaging up how we sell our beautiful remodeling services. So I think this was helpful to many people. Thank you for the lots of questions and engagement. And Michael is going to finish this extended Remodelers on the Rise episode off by saying, hey, if you guys heard nothing else, here's what I really want you to think about and focus on or hear again. What would you say?
Hey, if you heard nothing else, here's what I really want you to focus in and think about. Being robust in your estimating is like being fit when you go to the beach or when you go out and you feel good about taking off your shirt and going swimming, right? Because when you know all that stuff, there's no reason to hide. There's none of the embarrassment about, hey, the client might see through the fact that I'm not estimating this thoroughly. So I would argue it's very liberating. No more shell game. And you'll make, I think, take this way, you will be more profitable with a much more accurate and robust estimating system, and the use of a dynamic margin instead of a static margin will let you take advantage of what the market's doing. So
interesting. So what Michael is saying is, if you took nothing else, robust estimating is like going to a topless beach. Okay, we'll end with that, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Michael, thank you for your time. Thank you for your diligence in sharing all of this, and appreciate you.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right, see you guys.